Just one. Perfect.
There are these things out there that can be used to treat you that you've never even thought of, or even you've never even dreamt of.
Do you consider yourself cured?
Totally.
In 2009, Craig Rands did a 6-month tour of Afghanistan, serving with the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. He saw friends killed before him and, like so many others, suffered years of PTSD.
A little nervous.
Now, he's about to do something he never thought possible.
If speaking about my experience helps one person, then it's worth it.
And Craig, thank you very much.
It's turned my life around. It really has.
What is so unique about psychedelics is that they heal people. In psychiatry, we don't talk about healing people.
When the PTSD really started to take effect, you'd relive this every night. And not just every night. Every time you close your eyes, you can feel the heat, you can taste the dust, and you can smell the explosives in the air.
Last year, after 2 attempts to take his own life, Craig did something extreme, something that in this country would be illegal. He boarded a plane with 3 other veterans and went to Peru to take ayahuasca, an ancient plant remedy, a psychedelic drug found in the Amazonian jungle. The active ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT. It's generally consumed in a tea-like brew made from parts of the plant cooked in a large pot over a fire for many hours. A ceremony is conducted by a shaman, and the individual enters altered states of consciousness, usually lasting between 4 and 8 hours. DMT is one of several psychedelic substances that's shown potential to treat certain mental health conditions. Others include psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and MDMA in ecstasy. Craig's friends thought he'd become a hippie. He himself was sceptical.
I tried to go in with an open mind, as open a mind as I could, but when someone says, if you're going to take this drug, it's going to make you feel fantastic and probably sort your problems, of course it is. When you've taken it, we're going to shake this rattle and start chanting, and that's going to talk to the ayahuasca. Of course, they lost me at that point. They completely lost me. I still don't understand it, but it works. I was transported into space. It was colours and bits flying past you, and I can't put it into words.
Jo Neal is Professor of Psychopharmacology at Manchester University and Chair of the Drug Science Medical Psychedelics Working Group. She tells people 4 things about psychedelic drugs. They can heal, they're a one-off treatment, not drugs you need every day, their effect is long-lasting, and they are remarkably safe. When researchers talk about using psychedelic drugs, they mean psychedelic-assisted therapy, delivered by a therapist. No one's advocating veterans getting high on mushrooms or running into the jungle to trip on ayahuasca. Scientists think they work by briefly switching off the control centre of the brain, the part that directs the other parts. Renowned researcher Professor David Nutt likens it to temporarily removing the conductor of an orchestra. The instruments the different parts of the brain carry on playing, but now they can play to each other. New tunes, new neural connections can form, and a person can see their trauma in a new way. It forces someone to deal with the cause of their PTSD, instead of trying to treat the symptoms of it. It's like pressing reset.
I'm not walking around angry with the world. And sleep. Sleep is such a massive thing when it comes to mental health. If you're not sleeping, it's got the capacity to change how people think. That's incredible.
Of course, it won't work for everyone, but Professor Neal says these drugs are proving more effective for certain severe mental health conditions than pretty much any drugs used in psychiatry for 70 years. To give just one example, a clinical trial in the US took almost 100 people with severe PTSD. Most were veterans. The research group were given MDMA, accompanied by psychotherapy, MDMA being the active ingredient in ecstasy.
67% of those people in those 95 people in that trial no longer met the criteria for having PTSD. This is an extraordinarily powerful and positive result that we have not seen before.
It all sounds too good to be true, and there is one problem. They're illegal. They have been since the 70s. The mind-altering properties of psychedelics and fears of mass addiction terrified the government of the day. Over the years, research has disproved some of these risks, but the need for caution remains. A bad trip unsupported by clinicians can be dangerous, as can their use by people with certain health conditions. But despite much promising research, all psychedelic drugs remain Class A, Schedule 1, defined as a dangerous drug with no medicinal benefit, something which scientists like Professor Neil find difficult.
What frustrates you at the moment?
Oh, all of it. The law is horrendous, the British law. 1971 is over 50 years ago, and the UK government has kept all psychedelics are Schedule 1 drugs, and they're all still Class A drugs. That makes absolutely no sense.
The problem with psychedelics being Schedule 1, aside from it being illegal to take them, is that further research into their medical potential is severely restricted.
You have to apply to our Home Office for a controlled drugs licence to have any drugs that are in Schedule 1. So quite a lot of cannabis products are in there, I think opium's in there. All psychedelics. For me, it cost probably about £10,000. You have to have locked alarmed cabinets. You have to employ special people to dispose of the drugs. I waited over a year for the Home Office to process my application. You have to be inspected by the Home Office, which of course you have to pay for. So what we're asking the government to do is to give us a research exemption. To put it into context, we have a research exemption for anything in Schedule 2, ketamine, amphetamine, cocaine, opiates. So we're very sensible, responsible people. University laboratories and NHS hospitals, they are full of potentially harmful substances, and we're quite capable of keeping them safe.
Whilst Professor Neil fights to do more research, in his home in Margate, I meet a man who's trying to get psychedelic drugs to veterans. Former paratrooper Keith also treated his PTSD using ayahuasca. His organisation, Heroic Hearts, is currently trying to get charity status, which, given the drugs are illegal here, is difficult. Their mission is to get veterans like Craig access to psychedelic drugs by sending them places like Peru and the Netherlands, where taking them is legal. And Keith believes this could change everything.
We could change our society fundamentally. The potential is there to heal someone to a degree that their actions from that moment on are different, and their choices from that moment on are different, and I would say by different I mean healthier. If we're kinder to ourselves, if we're more patient with ourselves, if we're kinder to our families and our children and our partners, and we're more patient and loving, just in that microcosm of society, just in your household, then that ripple effect goes out. And so while it might sound rather grand to say that it could change the world, actually I believe it might.
This is a brave venture, but it's so badly needed.
You're in a clearing and the ground is covered with green moss, soft and springy.
The medicine that they're using, Heroic Hearts, helps people process, because that's what PTSD is, isn't it? Not being able to process something that's happened in the past. It helps you open up those boxes of things that need to be processed without putting people onto antidepressants.
Joe, Craig and Keith want psychedelic drugs to be reclassified so they can be researched and used as a medicine, not to be available in coffee shops. The government is cautious that relaxing regulations will increase the risk of misuse and harm, and some researchers agree. Professor Neil Greenberg is a psychiatrist who specialises in PTSD. He's also a former Navy commando. He thinks relaxing regulations is not the way forward.
You can make anything easier, but at what cost, at what risk? Plenty of people might benefit from having morphine to treat their pain, so we can make it very easily available. But the downside of that is there would be a huge amount of abuse and it wrecks people's lives. Cannabis absolutely can have beneficial effects in some situations, but should we make it more readily available and lead people to, develop psychotic illnesses? No, we shouldn't.
Professor Greenberg also argues that psychedelic drugs, whilst perhaps transformational for some, might not be the most effective way to treat large numbers of people with the NHS's limited resources.
It's quite intensive. It takes a couple of therapists. It takes, carefully orchestrated administration of a drug which has potential to do harm. It's given over many sessions. That's great. It will help people. But actually, if you can't get bog standard trauma-focused CBT over 8 sessions on the NHS at the moment, how are we going to make this more complicated intervention freely available? If you take oncology, looking at treatments of cancers, some of the really rare cancers can sometimes need medication that costs, huge amounts of money. I'm not saying we don't treat those people, but we have to balance doing lots on those sorts of 1s or 2s of people with looking at the masses. Over half of the people who have PTSD aren't coming forward and getting any treatment at all. The fact that we have psilocybin or MDMA-assisted psychotherapy isn't going to help anybody if they don't come forward for help. We should be using the simplest intervention that will get someone well to start off with, and not jumping into things that might seem shiny and glossy.
One of the incredibly frustrating things about this is that the laws are changing in other parts of the world. We are letting down our veteran community. They fought for us and they have to go abroad to access this treatment. That's absolutely shameful. And most combat veterans don't have the money to get on a plane and go in a hotel in Amsterdam. People are dying. We know that the suicide rates in combat veterans with trauma is extremely high. And we are failing.
What a lot of people might think is it being used as a gateway drug and all this sort of thing, but trust me, there's no chance of me going and taking that willingly again.
I don't think we're getting behind at all. I mean, I think if you look at the process of doing research, and we absolutely have to do research, there is no argument, in my view, for rushing through potentially dangerous compounds and saying, oh, it's just so important, we should be doing it. Sometimes it's really frustrating because these things take a long time and it's difficult. But what's more important than being frustrated is first do no harm.
Proponents of psychedelic treatments argue there is already substantial evidence, and the current classification of psychedelic drugs is preventing more research being done. The Home Office told us, "We have commissioned a consideration of research on these drugs more widely, including psychedelic drugs such as DMT, the active ingredient in ayahuasca. The government sympathises with patients suffering from distressing conditions and can understand the desire to seek the best possible treatment." Thanks for watching. For more from Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.